We have a candidate for Congressional District number 8. He's in the federal branch of government in Congress. His name is Jason Ritchie. And so again, we're going to ask him questions. Right down to the back.
Once again, we ask you to hold your applause until the entire panel is finished. How can we ensure that more minority businesses get contracts for federal projects?
Thank you. I'm Jason Ritchie. I'm the Democrat running the Congressional District. Thank you for the opportunity. I own and operate a small business, a construction business, Handy Habitats. I remodel homes for people in wheelchairs, with lifts, grab bars, ramps, that kind of thing. Building a small business is something I really enjoy doing, and I can tell you that it's an uphill climb no matter where you're from, what your challenges are, but it's the American dream, and everyone should have a shot at it. And I would support any legislation, any bill, that brings that American dream possibility to more people, specifically for minorities, specifically for immigrants in this community, in this country. We don't spend enough time building that in this country. It's important that you know that your federal representatives are out there trying to open doors, create opportunities. And I want to do that too.
Thank you. 80% of African American males have criminal records. Are you for rehabilitating and reintegrating those with criminal records, including felony records, by lifting the restriction on them receiving food stamps, Social Security income, federal education aid, state grants, federal housing aid, federal jobs, business licensing, and restoring their rights to vote and serve on juries?
Yes, 100%. And I also think that many people don't know that that's what happens when you've been convicted of a felony. It has to be about rehabilitation. We have too many people sitting in prisons at too young an age, not having a chance to rebuild their lives. And if we put those barriers up in front of them and being able to get back into life and start a new life, we're not doing anybody any good. We're missing out on a lot of talent for youthful indiscretion oftentimes. So I'm absolutely in favor of rehabilitation and knocking down those barriers, yes.
Do you know of any specific initiatives in Congress that would help meet some of these goals?
Not that I'm aware of, but I would support and try to push forward any that there are. And frankly, it's a shame that we're not out there trying to make that happen now. I know that it's an uphill climb with the leadership we have now in Congress, and I think that if we're not spending time building those relationships now, we're going to regret it long term.
The Seattle Housing Authority is proposing a new approach to rent structure and employment support for what they call work-able households. How can the federal government allow housing authorities and associations to implement policies that hurt vulnerable communities with federal money?
Bringing federal money back to this district and this state is essential. It's something our elected representatives here today do a great job of doing already. I would hope to be able to follow their lead and to do that, to help them do that. As it relates to housing, there is a huge need for accessible, affordable housing, specifically for the immigrant community, and specifically low-cost housing in this community. We're not doing a good job of creating the relationships to make that happen. It is the responsibility of the federal government, our representatives, to continue to build those bridges, and I would hope to follow the leads of Congressman McDermott and Congressman Smith, who are here today.
On housing and urban development funding projects, a certain percentage of funds are for hiring and training local low-income workers, but not all development projects comply with these regulations. How can the federal government hold state and local governments accountable?
I believe that's the law. They're supposed to do that. They're supposed to train people in those jobs. And to me, it's a very simple prospect. I mean, just from my own personal experience, one of the largest expenses business owners have are training people and making sure you've got qualified people to go build, for me, build homes, do carpentry work, plumbing work. That's the people I work with every day. Getting people up to those skill sets and being able to trust them and grow those relationships. It's a huge investment in time and energy and personal capital. And I think we should build projects at the federal level that grow those skilled middle-class living wage jobs in our communities. And that, we can do that, absolutely. I strongly favor that. That's why I'm running for Congress, to build those middle-class living wage jobs in our community.
Are there any specific initiatives or legislation currently in Congress, or maybe something you envision proposing that would meet these goals? Goals that you yourself?
Yeah, for me, it's about infrastructure reinvestment. That's something that I feel very strongly about. We have crumbling roads and bridges throughout our state and our country. It's time to rebuild them. It's time to put those trades to work and invest into those jobs, into those skills, and put those people to work. That takes federal leadership. So I would support legislation and co-sponsor and sponsor myself legislation that would actually bring federal tax dollars, loans, and grants that will bring infrastructure reinvestment, new bridges, roads, schools, fiber optics in our communities, train people in our communities that don't have those skill sets now to know how to build those roads, build those bridges, build those schools. And that's going to attract new businesses to our communities.
If you're elected, will you promise to meet with the coalition within 60 days of your election?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Congressmen whose districts will overlap into Seattle. The first is Congressman Adam Smith, who's from the 9th District of Washington. And the second candidate is Jim McDermott, who represents We're going to ask everyone to hold their applause to the end until each candidate has an opportunity to answer.
Again, I will say this in English while we are in the process of asking questions for the candidates who don't have a talk for us, please. Thank you.
How can we assure that more minority businesses get contracts for federal projects?
Thank you very much. The question was, how can we assure that more minority businesses will get more, you said federal contracts, but I think it should go beyond federal contracts in the state as well. Now, first of all, I want to apologize, not for being a Seattle Seahawks fan or for being a Richard Sherman fan, but I was at my son's soccer game and it started raining in the middle of it. I didn't have, traffic went very bad. I didn't have time to get home and change, so both soaking wet and underdressed, but very happy to be here. This is a major, major issue. It's something that we've been working on. First of all, on the state level, to make sure that women and minority-owned businesses get the percentage of the contracts that they're supposed to get under federal law. We actually have a pretty good law on both the federal and state level. It's simply not followed. My office has worked in particular to focus on the Department of Transportation and the problem with a number of projects not meeting that requirement. On the federal level, we're doing the same thing. We're working with a specific group of minority and women-owned businesses to put pressure on all levels of government to follow the law. We're cautiously optimistic that the Department of Transportation here in the state is going to start doing better on that. I was at a Table 100 event the other night and mentioned that they hadn't been doing that well. And the Department of Transportation was present, and they were greatly offended that I had said that. Called me up to say so, and I said, well, start doing better. And I won't say things like that. So, and they're reaching out to us, and they're reaching out to different groups. But look, the law's in place, we have to enforce it. It's also worth mentioning that this is incredibly important for the government. to make sure that it gets the best people doing its work. If we have discriminatory practices that don't allow women and minority businesses, then the government is missing out on highly qualified businesses who can provide high-quality service at a better price. It's about fair competition in addition to following the law.
I agree with everything that Adam said. I can't think of what I would add to it. The real problem here is we passed laws. When I was in the state legislature, when he was there, we passed minority and women-owned businesses legislation requiring that people get their chance to do it. There are federal laws that require it. It is clearly a question of enforcement. And one of the problems that we have is that as the budget is cut, what they do is they cut on enforcement of regulations. That's where the real problem occurs. Whether you're talking about environmental questions, or you're talking about labor questions, or you're talking about who gets the contracts. It's very easy, as many of you know, for people to get somebody sort of as a front person, but really it's a big company behind that's doing it, and it really isn't minority and women-owned businesses. It's big companies using one or two people to make it look like that, and not really getting a start in building their own business. And in this country, we're all a country of immigrants. We all started from nowhere, and we starting small and building and building and building. And if you don't continue to allow people to get into the bottom and build, you don't continue to build this society in a way that we have been strong in the past. The energy of this country has come from immigrants. There are people who came from someplace else and they have no place to go back to. They've got to make it work here. That's been true when the Irish and Germans came in the 1850s. It's true today. And we need to give people access to getting started in the process.
80% of African American males have criminal records. Are you for rehabilitating and reintegrating those with criminal records, including felony records, by lifting the restrictions on them receiving food stamps, Social Security income, federal education aid, state grants, federal housing aid, federal jobs, business licenses, and restoring their rights to serve on juries and to vote?
One of the biggest problems in democracy is that everyone has the right to vote. But sometimes, having given them the right to vote, we then put up ways to stop them from voting. And there are people in this country who believe that this country ought to be the way it was in 1789, which was when people like me, white men who owned property, were the only ones who voted. Everybody else stood back. And our process has been gradually to add people to the process over time. But what you're seeing today is a concentrated effort to suppress the voting of people of the lower income people of color, and this issue of people coming out of jail and not being able to get their civil rights back is just one more example. It is wrong. We should give people, once you serve your time, apparently you're paid for your crime, right? That's what the law says. But in fact, it turns out that you pay for the rest of your life because you can't vote, and you can't get loans in schools, and you can't get all sorts of benefits that are eligible, that any other American is eligible for. It is an absolute wrong that ought to be righted. People should be given their civil rights back when they come out of jail.
First of all, I totally agree with Jim on the voter suppression issue. This is a major, major problem nationally. Efforts to deny people the right to vote. The Supreme Court, bizarrely, just made a positive decision striking down one of those voter suppression laws from Wisconsin. That's a positive step, but many more are needed. And yes, to answer your question, I think that once you get out of prison, you want to have those rights restored. You want to have the ability to vote, the ability to get benefits, the ability to find a job. Folks have to be rehabilitated. In fact, there's a company in the South Carolina district in Kent that makes gourmet popcorn. It'd be a better story if I could remember the name of it. It was hard to remember, I guess. And it was a gentleman who was a felon who came out and started a business. He specifically hires people who have come out of prison because of his experience, but it is an unbelievably successful company. People can be rehabilitated. They need and deserve to get that second chance at that. And I really think that's important. The final point I want to make about this, we incarcerate way too many people in the United States of America. So this is a problem beyond just making sure we rehabilitate these people when they come out. We have a prison population that is too high, unsustainable, and we lock up too many people when there are alternatives to incarceration for dealing with crimes that are committed. So I think we need to deal with this comprehensively. I've worked with a variety of people. Lynn Howell, who locally has been very aggressive working with me on the mandatory minimum problem. There are federal laws on mandatory minimums for any number of different drug crimes that are A, discriminatory, and B, far too great. So we lock up too many people, but once they're locked up, they come out, we got to rehabilitate them. We have to give them a chance. And certainly right at the top of that list is to let them exercise their franchise and vote.
Thank you. The Seattle Housing Authority, through a program called Stepping Forward, is proposing a new approach to rent infrastructure and employment support for what they call workable households. How can the federal government allow the Housing Authority, the Seattle Housing Authority, to implement policies that hurt vulnerable communities that are renting?
What was the very last part of that?
Through a federal program, pretty much. Yes.
I think you're talking about sort of a comprehensive approach to access to housing. And actually, the Yesler Terrace, which is partially federally funded, but also federally funded on the Seattle level, is an example of where they want to go with this. Yes, provide housing, but also provide an entire community of services, job training, education, child care, everything that's necessary basically to make a sustainable community beyond just access to housing to improve the quality of our public housing. So there is a federal program to do that. I think we're one of the models in the nation here that they're working on over at Yesler. This is a many years project in terms of the different pieces of it that they're going to be opening up. But I think those projects are great. You've got to integrate services. Housing is terrific, but you need to build it with the ability to find a job, the ability for your children to get a high quality of education, child care where necessary, transportation where necessary. So I think a comprehensive federal program along those lines makes a great deal of sense. Like I said, we're doing it at Yesler. I think we should look for other opportunities to do that comprehensive housing program as well. And the federal government has a strong role to play.
Just a quick follow-up. The Stepping Forward program, are you familiar with it? The initiative?
I'm not, actually. I apologize.
Okay.
I thought the Stepping Forward program was part of this larger comprehensive approach that the federal government is doing.
It's an initiative by the Seattle Housing Authority to basically graduate rent payments. Are you familiar with that program?
Yes. I'd be happy to be supportive of that as well.
Are you support it?
No, sorry. Like I said, the public housing, it has to be affordable, and I think what the Seattle Housing Authority is trying to do is figure out how to do more mixed use. I don't know that that's the right approach, because right now people still can't afford housing. So I think we need to make sure that it's affordable. And I will say this, I don't know enough about the Stepping Forward project. I will get you a more comprehensive answer.
Thank you.
In 1980, we were spending about $40 billion at the federal level in housing and a variety of things. What we have seen has been a gradual reduction over the last 30 years. And basically, we have pulled out federal support of housing at the federal level. In Section 8, there's a long waiting list everywhere you go. What has stepped in its place has been state housing and local housing and housing initiatives on the ballot here and everything else. We have pushed all that responsibility down to the local level. What's going on, I only know from reading the newspapers. That has not been brought to us. It's not a federal program that's allowing them to raise the rents to make it hard for people to stay in housing. It is clear that in this society, we need a housing program, a major housing program to move back forward, because you have to live 40 miles away to find basic housing you can afford, and then you have no bus to get to work. So not only is it housing, but it's transportation. Those two issues are tied together in terms of having a workforce that can work in the city and take the jobs here. But we at the federal level right now, we're in the minority. Adam and I were in charge, there'd be a hell of a lot of money for transit and some for housing as well.
Can I just follow up? I understand that the Stepping Forward initiative is in the federal program, but is there anything that you can do to basically address this initiative and challenge it?
What you're pointing out is your job. Your job is to come to us and tell us what the Seattle Housing Authority is doing. Because I don't think Adam knows, he doesn't sit on the banking committee, I don't sit on the banking committee, so we don't know. We pass laws, and they're implemented at the local level, and we really need you to come tell us what's going on, and I welcome that opportunity.
If it's okay, if I can take another stab at this, and I'm not familiar specifically with Stepping Forward. I am familiar with the issue you're talking about. What the city is wrestling with is they want to attract investors to build this housing. And this is a major battle and a major challenge in Southeast Seattle, a portion of Seattle that I represent, the 9th District, is there's people who want more market rate housing so people will make more investments and build more. But there's the concern if you go more market rate, then you price the very people that you're trying to help out of the market. And I don't know what the right balance is, okay? But I will also say that if you don't set up the proper incentives to make sure that people will make investments and build this type of housing, then you've got a problem on that side as well. I think that's what the city of Seattle is trying to balance. I have absolutely no idea whether or not they're doing it right. It sounds to me like they're not. But you know, we're happy to look into that. But that's the reason that I propose things like that. How do you get people to make investments to build the housing? Part of it is to introduce some more market rate housing. What's the right balance? I'll tell you right now, as I live around Southeast Seattle, there's still a ton of people who can't afford the rent. So it seems to me that going up is not the right way to go. But that's the balance they're trying to show.
On housing and urban development projects, a certain percentage of funds are for hiring and training local low-income workers. But not all development projects comply with these regulations. How can the federal government hold state and local governments accountable?
Well, part of what is clear, I think, when we're living in an era when we have people in charge of government who do not believe in the government doing its job. So the way that the Republicans have handled this has been by cutting off the money so the department lays off people, and the people they lay off are always the enforcement people. My belief is you have to put more money into enforcement. That's the only way. You have wage theft. You've got all kinds of stuff going on in labor that where people are losing because there's no enforcement of the laws that are in place. We have good laws. It is enforcement that's the issue, and the sort of backdoor way to undo the law is just don't enforce it. So what we've got going on in this country now is a backdoor way of taking away what seems to be a law. It ought to be there. It says it's there, but you can't get it. And we hear all the time in every congressional office about projects that suddenly don't seem to be following rules. And at that point, we can only talk to the Department of Housing, and they say, well, we don't have enough people to cover all these projects. And so everybody back around. The issue is putting more money into so we can hire the inspectors they need to do.
I agree with that answer. The only thing that I would add is one of the things that my office has done, again, in this specific area that we're focused on, the Department of Transportation project, is actually to reach out directly to the contractors, people who are doing the hiring, and try to encourage them to follow the law and work with them directly to sort of build those relationships. And this is not always successful, as you might contractors just hire what they know and they don't follow the law. I mean, government, whether it's federal or state, is supposed to be there and say, hey, you violate the law, you're supposed to fix this. But if you can foster those relationships so that those contractors will just do it and not have to rely on enforcement, that would be better all the way around.
If elected, will you meet with our coalition within 60 days to discuss our priorities? Please, just a yes or no.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.